Have you ever heard the elders say money doesn't grow on trees? Well, I thought it did. I was a private school kid with a brand new car, a pocket full of credit cards, and a life filled with privilege. My daddy called it well off. And when I began school at the University of Washington, my college tuition was paid out of pocket. My parents' pocket, that is. Then my father's company fell on hard times. He had to shut his doors, declare bankruptcy, and just like that, my college dreams were in danger. What college fund? Where is the financial aid office? Who is FAFSA, and do I even know her? They said my parents, who were struggling to pay their own bills, made too much money to help me with financial aid. So I became one of the 45 million people who collectively owe more than $1.6 trillion in student debt. I had to ask my aunt, my grandmother, and even my godparents to co-sign my student loans. But I figured I'd just pay it all back when I became a big-time lawyer. And then I got that bill. I remember the sheer horror I felt when I saw the six-figure balance on my loans. When I was ready to buy my first home right before my 30th birthday, those student loans said, "Hold up, have you seen your credit report?" I'm telling you, if I ever see Sally Mae or her brothers Navient and Nelnet on site. Look, my student debt story is just a tiny sliver of a national crisis that impacts many Americans, regardless of party affiliation, race, gender identity, or religion. But as the saying goes, when America catches a cold, Black folks get pneumonia. White borrowers owe 65% of their original student loan debt a dozen years after they graduate, which is an astonishing amount, but 12 years after we graduate. Black student loan borrowers owe more than 113% of our original student loan debt. And the problem is not restricted to young people. The number of elders who have their Social Security retirement checks garnished for student loans has grown by 540% since 2002. So what is the real price of opportunity? Well, thankfully, I was able to graduate from Seattle University School of Law and became a lawyer. Next month, I'll turn 40 years old, and as I stand here before you all today, my student loan balance is still a whopping $60,514. My story is a tale of financial illiteracy, forbearance, and a failure to plan. But it isn't unique. For millions of people, the only path to the American dream is to scale an unclimbable mountain of debt. Unless, of course, one of y'all can find that money tree.
From the Howard Theater in Washington, D.C., you are watching Young, Gifted, and Broke, Our Student Loan Crisis, a BET News special. Here again, your host, Angela Rye.
Thanks, everyone, for being here, and everyone at home watching. We're here with an audience filled with current students and recent graduates to address a crisis impacting so many in our community. It's the crushing burden of student debt. Tonight, we'll be seeking solutions from influential members of Congress, including Ilhan Omar, Jahana Hayes, and Bobby Scott. We'll also be joined by leaders in higher education. We'll hear from actor and activist Jesse Williams, and most importantly, we'll be having a direct dialogue with our many students and recent graduates in the audience. But I want to start first, not with a show of hands, but with a show of numbers. We gave our audience cards to hold up, and I just want to see from you all, how much do each of you owe in student loans? Hold those cards up high so our audience at home can see this. Wow. So we know these numbers are crazy, but what we also know is this is not surprising. And so at this point, I know we have two students here who have numbers that they didn't hold up, but you all have an astonishing amount of student loan debt. So first, actually with you, I want to start with you and just hear about your story and tell us your name and how much you owe.
Hi, my name is Richelle Presime. I just graduated from George Washington University, and I now have $50,000 in student debt. Everyone I know is bogged down with student loans, and something that we ask ourselves all the time is how this student debt is going to affect whether or not we can afford certain life milestones, like buying a home, or even when choosing a partner. You know, we might have to ask ourselves, could we afford to get married, let alone have kids?
Absolutely, absolutely. And Blake, you also have a story. How much do you owe in student loan debt?
So hello, Angela. My name is Blake. I'm a recent graduate of North Carolina State University. I graduated in May, and now I am pursuing my master's in public policy, concentrating in campaigns and elections. And with that, I owe $40,000 in student debt. And basically, I'm an independent college student, so all of these loans and things are on me to pay back myself.
And by independent, you mean your parents are not at all responsible?
No, so I have to pay everything on my own. And so recently after school, I took a job in DC, working here full time. So living in a super expensive city and having to pay back all of these loans myself, I guess I just want to know, like, do you have any tips for financial stability and still pursuing my education?
Well, we hope to get to some of these answers tonight and so many more. Of course, this crisis doesn't just impact current students and recent grads. Student loan debt follows folks long after they've graduated. Folks like Jasmine McDuffie, a nurse who still hasn't made a dent in her loan payments 9 years after graduating. Let's take a look.
I've always done what I was supposed to do, follow the rules, go to school, get the job, so you can have a nice life. Okay, and we're off. Yeah. You can't drive, right. I went to one of the best colleges on earth, Spelman College, and unfortunately accumulated a lot of debt while there. My parents made too much money for government loans, so we were directed to the private loan sector. It has literally been a nightmare. I owe them $176,287.73. I have never shared that number with anyone because it is embarrassing. In 9 years, I've not missed a payment. I have variable interest private loans through Sallie Mae. I work 2 full-time nursing jobs. I'm a labor and delivery nurse at 2 separate hospitals. I'm just work, home, Parker, work, home. When I got married, there was really no verbal arrangement. This is my debt, and I was gonna pay it. That particular bill added a lot of financial stress to our marriage. I am not currently married anymore. I am making it happen, and I am doing it by myself financially. I have been a teacher, and I'm currently a nurse. Both of those areas of work afford people who've worked for X amount of years loan forgiveness. I am not able to receive that because I have private loans. It is the exact same loan company that other people are getting their loans forgiven through. Because of the word private, they're untouchable. You can't consolidate them. You can't send in income-based repayment documentation. I will be 63 when my last payment is made. I went to school for, what, to pay it back for the rest of my life? I can't get out of it. I don't know where to go for help. It is disheartening to know that the number is definitely gonna go up in December because I will then be out of interest-only payments. $1,800 a month is more than my current mortgage. If you're not in a place to get the full rides, the government funding, you are in a place to set yourself up for a trap.
That burden, that stress, that emotion is real. I want to turn now to 2 people joining us who also know the issue of student debt all too well. Congresswoman Ilhan Omar is a Democratic congresswoman from Minnesota. Since arriving on Capitol Hill, she has focused on finding solutions to the student debt crisis. Congresswoman Omar, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
And also joining us is Michael Arsenault, a New York Times best-selling author and Howard University alum. Michael's next book addresses his own student debt. It's titled, I Don't Want to Die Poor, and neither do I, Michael. Welcome to the show, Michael.
Thank you for having me.
So I want to start with you, Congresswoman Omar. You have said, like I said in my open, that you're one of 43 million with student debt in this country. Please talk to us a little bit about your personal story.
Yeah, I'm one of 45 million.
45 million.
45 million. And you know, it's been part of my journey and one of the reasons that drove me to run for office. I also have a daughter. Not only do I have student debt, but I have a daughter that's going to college in 2 years. And so the realness of this burden that we all feel shackled with has been real for me. I'm one of the people who are unable to purchase the home that they wanted to. I'm one of the people that are putting off, right, the dream to own that business, to create the kind of investment they want in the future that they want to have. And this idea that we are supposed to get an education to jumpstart a life and have a pathway to success has not been one that has been guaranteed to most of us. It comes with lots of stress. And so for my family, for my husband, it's been a real challenge to look at how much we're bringing in before getting to Congress, and to see, right, the amount of money that we have to write to pay off our student loan debt every single month.
Yeah, and Michael, this is a story that you can relate to. You also have talked about the ways in which your family were enlisted in your higher education process.
I take responsibility for my decision to fund my education in the way that I chose to do it. My mom told me that you could go to college, but I didn't know anything about the costs. I didn't realize maybe I needed to limit my dreams in some ways. I didn't think I needed to limit my dream. And one day at my high school, there was a recruiter. He looked like, I don't know, Chris Brown's like older brother in that same genre of bae. And so that,
Not a genre,
bae. I might have been in denial, but I wasn't. I was tempted to talk to him. And honestly, he asked me specific questions. I've always been very specific about what I wanted to do with my life. He heard me, and through like a 30-minute conversation, completely changed my perspective about what I could do. I wish only a year before I had met him, because I really went after scholarships. I had several, almost 20 outside scholarships. I worked nonstop. My family, we did everything we could, but we went through the private loan system. I didn't know anything about it. That's my fault. People talk about financial literacy, but they also prey on people like me.
That's an important piece, I think, because a lot of people think we made bad choices, and it's not about the bad choices we made. It's the system that's stacked up against you, right? When you're an immigrant, when you're the first to go to college in your family, when you're looking at, having to pay your rent and all of these other things, and the only options you have is to take up more loans. When you think going to private college gives you a bigger opportunity at a better life. All of that is the enticement that creates a system that preys on you.
And Michael, you had your mom co-sign loans for you, right?
Yes. There's an essay that I wrote for the New York Times, which is the basis of the book. It was interesting. The original digital title kind of alludes to the fact that I would never kill myself because my mom would still be on the hook for my loans. What I write about, what I write about in the book, and what I've written about already, and what I've talked about with many people who will listen, is that I am very keenly aware of how that debt affects you just beyond it's one thing is to not get a house and might delay marrying and dating. It impacts you on just a spiritual level.
Yeah.
You have to get up every single day and sometimes wrestle with the fact that, were you selfish for daring to think that you can dream the way you saw black people on TV or like some white folks?
Wow.
Were you selfish to think that, because at one point my mom had some words for my choice to want to go to one of these schools, but you know what, she believed in me, and she did it anyway. And I carried the guilt with me that I attached her name to that. I honestly didn't want to be like another man to let her down. Like, it's impacted me on a real level. Can't afford therapy yet because I got to get these loans up, but we almost there. But no, really.
We're gonna find you some low-cost therapy options, because we all
I've been
need
Googling
that.
around, yes.
Okay.
But no, it's just, I know how could that impact you just on a day-to-day level.
Yes.
And so many of these narratives about millennials, about we're ruining the economy, buying avocado toast, they're talking about why we're not having children. Like, that's so banal, and none of these people want to talk about how the fact that you set us up for this in so many different ways. Like, this is a generational thing. It blows my mind. So I just have really tried to, on a personal level, make real peace with my choice. It's really hard for people to tell you to shake things off. I don't always want to be a sad Mary J. Blige album, but sometimes that's just where I'm at.
You're not.
But no,
you're not.
really, like, I'm paying over $1,000 a month, and I've been doing that for well over a decade. And maybe I should not have chose to be a writer, but to be honest, I mean, do you know what the median income is? I work hard till I exceed that. I'm still broke because I'm set up for this. And I think about what my life could be if I just with private loans, I don't even negotiate with you.
Yeah.
It's like the government loans will at least, let that interest accrue, and that's on you. But the private were like, you better give me this money or I'm gonna ruin your life.
Well, I already
And that's
I
it.
told her about it at the beginning, as you heard. And unfortunately, we are out of time for this block. But Michael, I thank you so much for being here to share your story. We need to take a quick break. Much more to come. Stay with us.
Coming up, Congresswoman Ilhan Omar outlines her plan to eliminate student debt. Plus, star Jesse Williams and a major policy announcement revealed on our show. Stay with us. Welcome back to our BET News special, Young, Gifted, and Broke, our student loan crisis. Here again, your host, Angela Rye.
Knowledge is power, and tonight we are talking about how student debt is threatening the financial health of an entire generation of Black students and their families. The investment in higher learning is valuable, but is it too costly? Still with us is Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, and I want to welcome journalist Danielle Douglas Gabriel, who covers student debt for the Washington Post. Danielle, I want to start with you for a quick explainer in case anybody at home missed it. Can you talk to us a little bit about why the cost of college education is so high and how we got here?
There are a couple of factors at play. There's been a lot of state disinvestment in public higher education in the last few decades. And when you lower the amount of money you're appropriating to public colleges, well, then they have to raise tuition, or at least they say they have to raise tuition in order to offset that money. We're also seeing a lot of those schools trying to attract out-of-state students, or in some cases, just trying to attract students who can pay full freight. So they start building facilities that often are supposedly supposed to attract these students, but that comes at a cost, and sometimes that premium is paid by the students. But it is far more expensive to really deal with some of the educational needs of some of the student population that's come into our schools, dealing with their learning disabilities, having people on staff who know how to handle that to make sure that they have the resources to graduate. But the reality is, oftentimes, a lot of students of color are ending up at schools that don't have the resources to serve them entirely, and so they don't complete.
Wow. And Congresswoman Omar, you have introduced debt cancellation legislation. You have a very young district in Minnesota. You've talked about the importance of this issue to you personally. Talk about some of the pillars of this particular legislation and how it will work.
Yeah, and as someone who's part of the debt generation, I wanted to make sure that we were creating a proposal that would alleviate the kind of stress that people are dealing with. So what we're proposing is a simple cancellation of all debt, public and private. So a simple cancellation of the $1.6 trillion. And the way that we will pay for it, in the next 10 years is to add a small financial transaction to speculators on Wall Street. We believe that we had the opportunity to bail out Wall Street, and now Wall Street gets the opportunity to bail out the American people. And I think it's really important for a lot of people. There might be some people who are listening who might think, why would you want to cancel all of the student debt, right? There might be some people who could pay it off. And I think for us, we look at it as being the most simple and the equitable thing to do, because this debt isn't a rich person problem, right? Trump's children are not benefiting from this cancellation. They don't carry student debt. Most of the people who carry student debt are the poor and the middle class.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And Danielle, what are the arguments against debt forgiveness?
I think the issue is making sure it's comprehensive. For some students, taking on debt is an investment. They can pay it off, and that's fine. For other students, taking on debt is actually disheartening for their families because they don't have the resources to help them out when things get difficult, and perhaps they should never be the ones to borrow. So that's when you start thinking about the investment in free college and 2- and 4-year schools, higher education investment in private universities that are doing the hard work of educating students that need that kind of extra support but don't have the resources to do that. And by that I mean our MSIs, our HBCUs. And those institutions just don't get the same level of resources that the more prestigious ones do.
So we have a student question in the audience. Sky Webster, where are you? You're carrying $15,000 in student debt. $16,000 in student debt. And what's your question?
Representative Omar, If public colleges became tuition-free for all, how can you ensure that we remain competitive with private colleges? Also, is it possible to protect the quality of these colleges and they ensure that they don't become watered down like many public K through 12 schools?
We certainly, yeah, that's a really great question. And I think when we're looking at, right, all of these proposals, we have to make sure that we're putting protections in place so that 10 years from now, 20 years from now, we're not looking at a system that has now become inequitable for a lot of people. And so we want to make sure that when the investment is being created, that protection is in place. And I think the important piece to this is that there has to be a recognition that education is a public good.
Right.
Right? Education doesn't only benefit me as an individual, it benefits all of us. And so around the world, governments invest in education because they understand that's an investment in their country and that's an investment in their world. Now we need to have an understanding that higher ed is part of that basic education that people need in order to have that pathway to prosperity.
Thank you, Congresswoman Omar, for joining us. Danielle Douglas-Gabriel is going to stay with us. Our BET Town Hall on the student debt crisis will continue after the break.
My name's Gabby. For undergrad, I went to Northwestern University and grad school at DePaul University, and I have about $100,000 in debt. For me, debt sucks because I always subconsciously feel weighed down in every financial decision that I make. I also feel pressure to get a high-paying job instead of following my true passion, which is doing more grounded work, nonprofit work, education, and being able to help the community. I think if I was debt-free, I could move around life being more of my true self.
You are watching Young, Gifted, and Broke, a BET News special. Here again, your host, Angela Rye.
Welcome back. Washington Post journalist Danielle Douglas-Gabriel is still with us, and we are now joined by another rising star in Congress, Representative Jahana Hayes of Connecticut, who is a former school teacher and National Teacher of the Year. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I want to focus this part of our show on two terms we hear all the time: predatory lending and for-profit colleges. Danielle, let me first start with you. What do those two terms mean, and why should we be paying attention to them?
Predatory lending, very broadly, means there are certain lenders out there that will kind of saddle you with onerous terms, high interest rates for debt that they know that you probably can't afford to repay. Sometimes in the private market, you see that. There are a lot of schools, particularly for-profit schools, that would have in-house lending programs where the school would be doing the lending, and they would sometimes come to a student mid-year and say things like, well, you're not going to be able to stay into this class unless you take out this extra money, but don't worry, it's actually really a scholarship, but turns out it was actually a loan. And I think the problem that we're seeing is that there's not a lot of regulation around for-profit colleges. There used to be. This administration has done its best in order to strip out a lot of those regulations. So the kind of accountability measures that would ensure that students weren't facing certain onerous behavior or certain predatory behavior is no longer in place.
Congresswoman Hayes, we know Education Secretary Betsy DeVos just made it more difficult for federal student loan borrowers to cancel their debt on the ground that their college defrauded them. The move is projected to save taxpayers more than $11 billion over the next decade, but is it even worth it?
No, absolutely not. This administration, specifically this Secretary of Education, is not a friend of education. She has over and over again stripped away the rights and protections. And to your last point, when you said it'll save the country billions of dollars, I myself have over $100,000 in student loan debt. And when people say, I heard the young men in the first block talk about, did I make the right choice? You know, don't I get to dream too? Mm-hmm. Don't I get to pursue a higher education? I'm the first in my family to ever go to college, first to graduate. Went to a community college, four-year institution, and then in order to be a teacher, had to pursue a master's degree. But this idea that only certain schools are reserved for certain people, don't I get to dream? There's a responsibility of our education secretary and our Department of Education to protect the student. Where does that happen? And this administration is not doing that.
Well, speaking of leaders, absolutely, yeah. Speaking of leaders who will protect students and graduates, from that, you have a policy announcement that you want to make on the show. What is that announcement?
Yes, the Pell Grant Restoration Act. Currently, schools that have been found to defraud students, there is some debt relief that you can apply for and be eligible for. But even if the loan is forgiven, you don't get your Pell Grant eligibility restored. Right now, you only have 12 full-time semesters of Pell Grant eligibility. So if you've spent 6 of them at a predatory school, even if the loan is forgiven, you've lost 6 full-time semesters of eligibility. I think that once the loan is forgiven, you should get that eligibility back, because all I want is a chance, just the same level playing field as everyone else.
That's amazing. And thank you so, so much for doing that and for being an advocate, even when the administration won't be.
That's all right, but that's why we're here.
Yeah,
Separate
absolutely.
but co-equal branches of government.
Absolutely. Thank goodness for that. So we have another student question in the audience from Maria. Maria, where are you?
Hi, so my name is Maria Filippo. I'm a recent graduate of the University of Massachusetts at Amherst, and I currently owe over $42,000. So if I had known the full financial implications of my choice to attend a 4-year institution, I would have chosen another path towards matriculation, such as attending community college first. So my question for you is, using the legislature, what plans are in place, if any, to make financial literacy a mandatory part of the student loan process?
And Danielle, just to you, whose responsibility is it to educate students on loans and student loan debt?
Right now, no one's, to be honest. You know, it would be nice if it started at the high school level. It would be nice if it was a mandatory part before people were to apply to even fill out the FAFSA, to do some kind of counseling or some kind of workshop. But that isn't quite in place. There are certain states that have state programs and state workshops. There are some schools that take it upon themselves to do so. But for the most part, a lot of students don't find out the full extent of what is before them until that exit interview when you're graduating.
Or until that first bill comes.
Yes.
Witness.
6-month period.
But, or, because I've heard it over and over, I could have made different choices, or I could have done, or we can just operate in a space where there's transparency and you, as a student, can expect that you will not be preyed upon. Or we can make sure that the tuition that you're paying matches the education that you're getting. Or we can have a government that regulates these types of programs. The idea that at 17 years old, all I wanted to be was a teacher. All I wanted to do was go to school. So this idea that you have to come with all of that just to get an education. That's just not reasonable.
I know we have another student question from Adam. Adam, where are you? Adam, yes.
Hi, I'm Adam Jefferson. Representative Hay, my question is for you. Recently graduated from the Art Institute of Fort Lauderdale a few years back. I was able to get some of my loans forgiven, but I still owe $20,000 in debt, and I have to repay that. I, along with a few of my other classmates, are wondering how your legislation is going to be able to help us, especially when we were promised jobs that did not happen and are not going to happen for people of our background.
I have a little bit of a different take on loan repayment. I think that we should have up to $50,000 repaid. I think that we should have some loan forgiveness, that private loans should be handled in the same way as public loans, that you should be able to refinance those loans, and if there is some predatory lending in place, that the federal government, more specifically, the Department of Education, should protect you and all students from that type of practice.
Absolutely. Congresswoman Hayes and Danielle, thank you all so much. We have to take a quick break.
Welcome back to our BET News special, Young, Gifted, and Broke, our student loan crisis. Here again, your host, Angela Rye.
Welcome back. The issue of student debt made headlines last spring when billionaire Robert F. Smith announced that he would pay off the student loans of the entire Morehouse graduating class of 2019. We asked some of these lucky graduates to reflect on how the elimination of their debt has impacted their lives.
Even though it's graduation's a happy day, you have this cloud of knowing that you're in student debt. Family members are bringing it up. People at the school is bringing it up. people in line are bringing it up. It's like, can I just celebrate for a minute?
On behalf of the 8 generations of my family who have been in this country, we're gonna put a little fuel in your bus.
Mr. Smith, when he gave the announcement, it was said in such a calm way, so we didn't catch it at first.
And my family is making a grant to eliminate their student loans.
There's a quick silence where everyone's just looking around and thinking, whoa, wait, cool.
And it really had to sink in. I was texting my family did he really say that? What did he say? He's paying for our loans? What's going on? You all are debt free.
I'm giving him a hug. I give the guy next to me a hug.
I think that college should be free. I think it should be free for people who can't pay for it, people who just don't have the means to obtain that higher education.
Not to sound like a pessimist or anything, but sometimes when I hear that, it's in 5th grade, you had that president who wants to run for student class president. We're gonna have pizza parties on Friday. Let's be real. Every Friday, we're not gonna have a pizza party. We live in America, which is built off of capitalism.
Knowing that I have my debt paid off means that I can pursue other opportunities, such as law school, such as possibly pursuing a master's.
So weight off my shoulders.
This gave me a sense of freedom. I can follow my dreams. I can take risk. I can, do things that other people get to do who have more financial power than me now.
Continuing our town hall, I'm joined now by 2 gentlemen who know the issue of student debt very well. Congressman Bobby Scott from Virginia is the chair of the House Committee on Education and Labor, and Dr. Wayne Frederick is the president of Howard University. Thank you both for being here. Yes. We might have some Howard fans in here. Dr. Frederick, can you talk to us about how Howard specifically is addressing the student debt crisis?
One of the concerns I have is cost. So we charge our tuitions about 40% less than other private institutions, and we have continued to not have that escalate at the same rate as escalated elsewhere. We take in 60% Pell Grant students in undergrad for a private institution. Again, very unusual. We take in even more than a lot of public institutions in the country. We also are trying to be pragmatic about solutions. So we have a rebate program, tuition rebate program. If you graduate on time or early, we give you back 50% of your direct costs that you paid in the last semester. And I think we have to start focusing on 4-year graduation rate and even build a 3-year graduation rate for our underrepresented students who are academically gifted and give them the opportunity to get there.
That's amazing. Thank you, Dr. Frederick. Absolutely, give it up. I'm going to turn now to the audience for more questions. Amir, what's your question?
Thank you and good evening. My name is Amir Bayena, and I am an entrepreneur from the University of Pennsylvania. I am 24 years old with $30,000 in student loan debt from the federal government, and currently I just started my own business. Shouldn't there be an income-based repayment plan for anyone in my position?
Well, there is an income-based repayment plan where you can pay a percentage of your income, and after 10 or 15 years, depending on the payment plan, the rest of your loan will be discharged. One of the problems that you have to be in the right plan, and one of the problems we're running into is the Department of Education isn't telling people what plan you need to be in and what repayment plans there are. But income-based repayment is already, so if you're just making a little bit of money, you pay a little bit on your loan.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. And we have another question from Talik. What is your question?
My name is Tyleek McMillan. I'm a recent graduate of the illustrious North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University. And like many, I want to pursue my education. I'm $35,000 in debt, and I want to go to law school to one day be a great lawmaker like you all. So what someone in my shoes do so I don't add on to the $35,000 that I'm already in debt?
If you go into law school, you're going to incur some debt. One of the things we've seen is that those who get professional degrees can pay off huge loans. But we need to address the underlying problem. Colleges and professional schools, particularly state colleges, are charging too much in tuition. Several decades ago, states were paying about 2/3 of the cost of a state college education. Student responsible for 1/3. Now the states are only putting up 1/3 and often less than that. We need to get the states, coerce the states into getting back up to 2/3, so it's more affordable. Pell Grants need to be significantly increased. When Pell Grants used to cover 75% of the cost of going to college. Now it's less than 30%. Right now, the federal budget is making a profit on your student loans. We ought to be subsidizing student loans, not trying to make a profit on it. That would significantly reduce the interest on the loans.
Congressman Scott and Dr. Frederick, thank you so much for joining us. One last commercial break, and when we come back, actor Jesse Williams and author Jessica Brown will share advice for students looking to find ways to pay for college. Stay with us.
You are watching Young, Gifted, and Broke, a BET News special. Here again, your host, Angela Rye.
So often, students applying for college don't know where to get information about all the scholarships out there. That led a young entrepreneur to come up with an innovative platform to address that problem, and he got a familiar name to help.
As a student, I struggled in college with the stresses of student loans and being able to pay for school every single semester, doing ROTC and working work-study jobs and 2 other jobs and coming up with that extra $5 grand, $8 grand, $7 grand semester to semester, worried that I was gonna have to drop out. Well, some people in this country have their entire family tree is literate in that language. They've done it, they know the shorthand, they can grandfather you in, they've got legacy, whatever, but they can just speak about it. You have a community. Some people don't know anybody that knows anybody that knows anybody that has attended, graduated, or benefited from a high school degree, never mind a college degree.
Oftentimes, a lot of scholarships actually get no applicants. There's scholarships like from Walmart and big corporations that sometimes got like 12, 13 applicants. The problem is it's so hard to find different things, and you have to filter through scams. And then once you go through a list, you're like, okay, I got to go list 100 scholarships, and I don't even know if any of these qualify for me. So they're like,
I'm exhausted just thinking about having to do it on a schedule of an 18-year-old.
Yeah, so that's another big thing that we do is actually make sure the scholarship that you're getting matched with actually are relevant to you. And the machine learning learns more about you and how you use the app, and we actually rank the scholarship based on your likelihood to get them.
We all know people who had to step out of school. They didn't quite finish, and you always think you're gonna go back, and it's a really hard thing to do. So this is really about helping working people from working class families and people who can really just continue it, because one little step to keep you on track can make a world of difference down the line.
Scholly is just one of many resources available to help, and here to share more tips on how to manage student loans is Jessica Brown. She's the founder of the website collegegirl.com. Welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So just talk to us about 3 of your top 3 tips to help students that are struggling and weighed down in student loan debt right now.
Well, number one is researching scholarships, as over $100 million annually in scholarship money goes unclaimed. So students need to stop scrolling and start doing more research to begin to find resources that will help pay for their college tuition. Additionally, following up with the financial aid office to confirm they've received your official documentation as well as your scholarship information. And sitting with financial aid and building a relationship will allow them to help you understand the true cost of college so you can understand alternative payment methods. Additionally, borrowing what you need and not what you want, as so many students are over-borrowing in student loans that lead to an access of a refund. So it's so important for students to make sure that they're only borrowing for direct cost.
That's super important, Jessica, and I totally understand it. I wish that I would have had a Jessica while I was in college. Thank you so much for being here with us. For more tips, please go to BET.com. The stories you've heard tonight are not isolated anecdotes. They are real-life stories that represent millions of real people drowning in student loan debt. My advice based on my own experience is just like Jessica said, borrow what you need, not what you want. This will help you better manage your overall student loan debt. And reach out to every local, state, and national elected official and tell them they have to make a choice. That choice is, if we can bail out big banks, we can certainly bail out the people. For too long, we've accepted that's just the way it is. But when we all use our voices, change happens. We've heard practical solutions and policy proposals that could give us some very much needed relief. We have the opportunity to change a system that is so often stacked against us. Go to bet.com/younggiftedbroke and research where the presidential candidates stand on the student debt crisis. I'm Angela Rye. For all of us at BET, thanks for watching.